Hello, everyone. I am Mary, speaking on behalf of the French Competence Center, the CCFR, within the EuroCC project, with Karim Azoum and Pierre Aubert from the lab in Annecy. Together, we coordinate the Grayscale Thursdays and the Grayscale School. So welcome to this new edition of the Thursdays webinar series. Each week, we explore a central topic from the Grayscale School curriculum, gradually building the knowledge and skills that will prepare you for the summer school. So these webinars are fully online, free of charge, and open to everyone, whether or not you plan to attend the school, of course. But if you're considering joining the summer session, or if you'd like to become a host site and easily share the training locally within your institution, anywhere in Europe, just reach out to us. We'll share all the relevant information and links in the chat. We're delighted to see this community growing week after week. Thank you, everyone. If you found this session useful, please talk about them around you. It will help us. And today's speaker is Sébastien Vallat, one of the instructors of the Grayscale School. And to introduce both the topic and our speaker, I now hand over to Pierre Aubert, the founder of the Grayscale School and researcher at the Laboratory of Physics and Particles in Annecy. So Pierre, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mary, for the introduction. So, yeah, you already know normally Sébastien from the previous webinar about unit testing, but now we'll have something a bit more complex. So Sébastien he's around for many time now. So you started at CEA and then you move a bit into the CERN and then to INRIA and then to CNRS and also a bit in the industry as well. And you worked particularly on really big projects, so millions of lines of code. And of course, once you want to optimize stuff like this, you need to have tools and you need to understand well memory. You were called Mr. Malloc in CA because you parallelize the malloc of the Linux malloc. So be glad to Sébastien to have a nice malloc and an optimized malloc, and you developed a lot of tools around it to spy what malloc does, why you allocate this size and this memory at this time and not this one or stuff like this. And so, of course, Sébastien will explain that to you much better than me. If you have questions, don't hesitate to use the chat. I will answer all the questions at the end of the session. And I wish you a happy webinar. And Sébastien, it's up to you.
Thanks. So hi everyone. So as Pierre presented, I'm Sébastien Vallat, and I will talk about memory allocations, why and how to profile. So for this presentation, we will speak about the memory problem to remind that this is on the road on the performance and on the development of an application. We'll see some existing tools to profile this kind of problems. And I will present two tools which I developed personally, which are Malt for malloc tracker to track the mallocs of an application, and NumaProf, which is a tool about non-uniform memory accesses, which can slow down our application on some large compute nodes. As Pierre said, I made my PhD around the memory management domain, so everything behind malloc, going from the caches of the CPU up to the application, passing through the operating system at the CA and the University of Versailles. And there I made a postdoc to develop a first tool, which is Malt, to track everything behind malloc. And as I said, NumaProf, which I developed at CERN as a postdoc to track the NUMA aspect of the memory accesses. So the base of the problem, we can remind that today we have large servers with a lot of cores. Now it's quite easy to find a server with 256 cores somewhere. We can also find more sometimes. And on those servers, we can now find up to 6 terabytes of memory. This is a very high number, but more commonly we can find up to 1 terabyte or 2 terabytes. This is a bit more common today. And of course, on such a server, we tend to make running some large software, not a simple one, because otherwise we don't need such a machine. And this large software is written most of the time for the science side in C, C++, Fortran, Python, or a bit Rust now. It's coming on the road. And of course, when we are making a large software, we will finish with millions of memory allocations, not just a few, because to allocate 1 terabyte of memory, this is very rare that we allocate it in one allocation. So we will finish with some problems which will rise from the memory management side. In addition of that, the software is large, so it's not easy to handle from our side. When it's large, it's also most of the time using some external libraries, which we don't know what they are doing with the memory management side. And in the research side, we can also add the problem that we have some turnover over the codes, because developers are coming in and coming out depending on the short-term contracts we have in the research side. So with all those topics in our hands, we finish with some problems with the view of the memory management of a large code. First, because it is hard to have it. Second, because we have some developers moving in and out of the code. So the question is how to handle this. And in addition, we have for the people running on large nodes, most of the time you have 2 or more CPUs on the same server. So you have a NUMA architecture, non-uniform memory architecture, which can request some action from yourself in your code to take care of that if you are running in parallel with threads. So to come back to my domain, the research in memory management rely a lot on one paper which has been made in 1994, which is Eating the Memory Wall, an application of the obvious, which is a paper of Wolf and McKee, which are some people who understood at some point that you have a CPU computing, but at some point the speed of the memory is not accelerating as much as the CPU side in terms of computation, which means that at some point the CPU will finish to weight the data from the memory much more than it computes. This is why it's called the memory wall. So you will be your application will be limited by the memory and not anymore by the power of the CPU itself. So to tackle this problem, the CPU founders like Intel, AMD, or the GPU boards have made a lot of things with caches, which tries to hide the latency of the memory to accelerate the accesses. But at some point, it requires some cares in the application to take it in account in a nice way. This is exactly the kind of problem I was studying during my PhD. So for example, here it's a large numerical simulation, 1 million lines of C++ code running on a server with 128 cores, 16 CPUs at that time to get this in 2010. And I was playing with malloc, so I wanted to change the memory allocator used behind this application. So we can see here the time execution given for the glibc, so the standard memory allocator from Linux. And on the right, the 2 best memory allocator from the literature, which are gmalloc and tcmalloc, one from Facebook and one from Google now. Those 2 allocators were supposed to be better for parallel application, but as we can see here, it's not the case for this numerical simulation, because the slowdown is up to 35% of performance loss. So I studied a lot these problems during my PhD, and I was able to show that by just changing the memory allocator, we were able to reduce the execution time by up to a factor 2 on this application by taking care of the NUMA aspect inside the allocator itself, and by taking care of using the memory in a better way. So I will not enter in the details why it's faster here. We will discuss this more in details during the school. But let's say that changing a memory allocator in some large application can have a huge impact on the performance. So sometimes we need to understand how our application is behaving in terms of memory management. This is why I developed the tools which I will discuss next. This is true on the performance side, but also true in the memory consumption side. So how much memory the application is consuming when it's running. Here again, the same application by looking the memory consumption on 1 MPI rank per MPI rank on a server. And using the glibc, we consume 3 GB of memory. And with gmalloc, we can go down to 2 GB of memory, and tcmalloc is consuming 7 GB. So remember that those two allocators were a bit slower. tcmalloc was supposed to be the faster one, but it is in principle a bit faster, but consume a bit more memory. And again, as before, the gap between the memory consumption, depending on the way we are running, is not a few percent, but here a factor 2.5 between the highest and the lowest results we can obtain. So there is things to understand, and we need tools probably to help us to understand what is happening in this kind of tool application. So since my PhD, I'm always saying this sentence: you need to understand the memory behavior of your application, mostly in the HPC domain, if you want to get the nice performance you can extract from your server. So as I said, during my PhD, I was mostly digging into this memory problems by looking in logs or by analyzing what mallocs received when it is called, which was a bit very hard for me. So I would have been very happy to have some tools. So in postdoc, I developed one, which is Malt, Malloc Tracker, to track all the mallocs and report you in a nice way what is happening in your application. This because I noticed that we have nice profiling tools for the timings, probably Valgrind, vTune, etc. But for memory usage, you have very few for the Linux environment, or at least freely available. I wanted to tackle three things. In one case, the lack of memory resources. So if you consume too much memory on a server, how to reduce the memory footprint of your application. And the performance impact of the memory management side. When you are making millions of allocation, you can probably improve the performance of your application by making some minor changes in your code. A bit less tackled by my tool, the memory layout. So depending on how you place the segments in your memory, this is more for the expert of an allocator, but in some ways the tool can allow you to understand a bit these things. The issues I want to track is some points. I want to know where the memory allocations are done in the code, because I'm a developer. I want to see them on my code where they are. I want to know their properties. What are their sizes, their lifetime, and how they are placed. I want to detect some bad patterns which are problematic for the performance side. I want to detect the leaks, and probably also want to know the memory which is used by the global variables and the TLS. This is more for the Fortran application, because in Fortran in old Fortran you tend to have a lot of memory stored in the global variables. TLS also, thread local storage. This is Malt is the single tool I'm knowing which are able to report the memory used by the TLS. So just to show a small example, what I want to track is in one side the global variables, as I said, what are their sizes and how much memory they consume. Possibly Malt is now, since a year, reporting also how much the variable is used. So if it's not accessed anytime, Malt will tell you. We have also some indirect allocation. If we have one function at some point calling some mallocs internally, and we don't know what this function is doing, for example, because it's coming from a library, so we want to detect what it is doing. We have possibly a leak. Here we allocate a pointer and we never free it. We can have a very large allocation. For example, if you have some cube matrix making an array become larger than what you expected, this is good to know. And you have also the problem. This is more for the performance side. This case about the short life allocation. So, for example, you have a for loop, and in this for loop you make memory allocation, a quick compute, and free. And if you make alloc free, you can pay a very high price about the performance in your loop. Which in practice, if you want to make a better code, it's better if you can to make out this allocation out of the loop. So we want to detect this kind of case with the tool. So of course there is some existing tools, so I will list some of them here, so you know them. There is in the one side Valgrind with two sub tools, which is memcheck, which permit to find two things: the correctness of the memory allocation, how it is accessed, and also the memory leaks. So Valgrind, you probably know to find your leaks with a lot of logs which finish in the terminal if you have a bad code. And Massif, which is this graphical interface presented here, which permits you to have a dynamic view of the application, how much it consumes over time. And by taking some snapshots, which are taken here, you can find at the peak time where the memory consumption is coming from. With the problem that Valgrind Massif is taking some snapshots, so if the peak is happening between the two snapshots, you will miss it probably. So in Malt, I have a specific way to handle this and being sure to capture the peak. Another tool in some ways in the open source community is Google App Profiler, which is coming with tcmalloc. This tool, personally, I found it a bit difficult to interpret the results because it's providing a kind of call tree annotated with the metrics in what I found a bit difficult readable way. But some people say they were able to improve their application with that tool. Of course, there is some commercial tool which exists. On IBM, there is Purify++. On Parasoft, there is Ensure++, two commercial tools. One of them is running only on Windows. I forget which one. I think it's Ensure. But in addition to be commercial, so you need to pay them, they have a quite old graphical interface, which at some point show some limits also because the tools are think for the time we had a few gigabytes of memory and not the terabyte of memory we have now. One great tool also is vTune. Since a few years, vTune now embed a memory profiling analysis also, mostly to get the memory consumption of the application. You have very few metrics, but it permits to quickly understand where your memory is coming from. Plus, you have a timeline and you can select things over the execution. The last one is Visual Studio, so not VS Code, Visual Studio on Windows, which has an embedded memory profiler, which is quite nice also, I should say. It provides a lot of metrics and ways to analyze how your memory is consumed. But it's not available for Linux, so not too much for the HPC community I'm coming from. So what I wanted to provide with Malt, I wanted to provide exactly the same semantics that Valgrind Cache-Grind to map all the allocations on the source code, to track the memory leaks, the memory peak, and for the performance to track the number of memory allocations, the sizes of the allocation, and the lifetime to detect the short-lived allocation as I have discussed in the for loop before. In some ways, Malt is not doing traces, so it will not trace every alloc and dump them in a file. It will make a profile, which means that during the execution of the application, I will project the allocation on two axes. In one side, on the time side, to have some timelines. And on the other side, on the call stacks, on the code, to show where the allocation are done. And of course, I will lose what is the details over each allocation. There is currently some options to make a trace, but it is not yet reported in the web view, so we will not be able yet to analyze it. So for the graphical interface, Malt is based on a web graphical interface with a small embedded web server to run it, which is nice to run on a cluster because you can launch the server remotely. And you get a view like this. So this is a fresh new graphical interface, which is available since 3 months now. Because I totally rewrote it a few months ago thanks to INRIA. In this interface, you get first global run information, so the metrics, the global metrics about the consumption of your program, the details of what you are running, the host on which you run in, the command you executed, and some context, so which allocator you are using typically. This is to summarize the run you just made. And more interesting, you get some global metrics. So to summarize on different aspects of the memory management side, what are the peaks about the different metrics which are tracked by Malt. So the requested memory, which is the memory allocated with malloc, and the virtual and physical one, because we will explain during the school that there is a difference between both. Some metric about the allocator pressure, how much memory allocation we are making, the number and the amount. The number of allocation we are doing per second, because if we are doing too much, it can be a problem of performance. Here, for example, we have an application where we have a recycling ratio of 1000, which means that the allocation is allocating and deallocating most of the time all its memory. And you can see here that Malt is also providing some warnings sometimes when some metrics looks a bit strange, so you need to look at them. You get the memory used by the global variables, the memory leaks, and the block size average, the minimum, maximum, and average to understand which kind of blocks you're allocating in your application. You get also some per thread statistics to understand in a multi-threaded application if your memory allocation are done by one thread or by all the others. This can sometimes pose some permit to understand a bit how your application is behaving. This is not where you gain performance, but just to understand how your application is done. This is useful sometimes. The more interesting view of Malt is this one, because it's annotation of the source code. So you will get directly your source code with the annotation of the metric you can select. So here I selected the number of allocation which are done per line. So here we see that we have a malloc and it is done 110 times, plus recursion, which is making some allocation. Here some reallocs, which are called just once. You can see a small color also. The hotspots are shown in red, the annotation, so it attracts you to look at this line more than the others. And of course, you can select the metrics. There is plenty of metrics available in Malt. The sizes, the lifetime, the peak memory consumption, which is the default one, the number of allocations, the summed, how much memory you allocated by summing all the allocation, which says the volume you allocated, which sometimes is translated as a price to get the memory from the operating system, etc. On the left, you get like in KCacheGrind, you get the list of function, and on the bottom, you get the call stack when you click on one annotation to know from where you are coming to access this line. If you click on an annotation, you can get some details on what is happening on this line. So all the metrics which are exported, the ranges of sizes which are allocated, the number of frees, the lifetimes, the peak, local and the leaks. This I need to improve a bit the presentation, but you get all the metrics to understand in details what is happening on this line. You get also, thanks to an intern student from CERN, a nice graphical view of the call stacks, which you can dig in by clicking to dig in the graph. So with the annotation, and in red the hot path where the problems can land on. So again, like the previous view, you can select the metric you want to look on. Here it's the global peak. So at the peak time, how much memory is consumed by each function. So here 8 megabytes, where they are coming from. You have, of course, memory management is a dynamic aspect of the application. So you have some time charts, how much memory is used over time. So the requested metric, which is what you requested with malloc. The physical memory used by the application, accounting the global memory variables, the stacks, and the memory mapping of the executables. And the virtual memory, which is what is really mapped in the memory space. Notice that you can export the data of most of the charts of Malt, so either as an SVG or directly the data, if you want to plot them again in your side for a paper, for example. You have also the allocation rate, so how much memory operation, malloc operation you are doing per second. So here we can detect some phases in the application. For example, here we have a phase where we are making only mallocs, another phase where we are making only frees, and we interleave the phases like this during the run. So we can understand the behavior of the application like this in terms of dynamics. I will not present all of them, but there is at least 4 others time charts presented in Malt. And another view is also to understand the dynamics about the application in terms of sizes, how much, what is the size of the allocation we are doing. So here we have an example of something not very good for for the performance of the memory consumption, for example, which is an application which is allocating a lot of 16 bytes arrays. Most of them are of this size, which can induce large overconsumption of memory because of the management of the small blocks. So we'll see a bit later this example from where it's coming in an application. For the global variables, you will get the top 10 global variables, or you want to search them, you can search them also by search with the name of the variables, the virtual memory size it's requested. If it's a TLS, you will have a small annotation to say that it's a thread local storage and the amount of memory it's using multiplied by the number of threads. You can have also access to the source location if Malt succeeded to find it with the debug symbols where it is and how much it is used. So for example, here we have a variable of 64 megabytes, which only 4 kilobytes of it have been accessed. So ideally you need to add something to put a warning here, but you can that way understand if your variables are really used or if it's there for nothing. For the global variables, you get also a view like this with a square size proportional to the size of the variable, so you can quickly get a view of how much the memory is distributed over your application. You get also a view in terms of charts, which is another way to look at this metric. So let's move to some real case. So there is also some other views in Malt we'll probably show during the demo after that, but to show a real case how we can analyze a problem, we can take AVBP, which is a CFD simulation from Surfax. And at some point when I was developing Malt, there was a student in my team which was making a GPU version of this application and had a problem at the initialization time because he was using a larger mesh because he was able to compute faster. But the init time of the application was taking a long time, up to 5 minutes sometimes, when he was making some short run. And he was not understanding why, and we decided to pass it on Malt. And at some point in Malt, we have the allocation rate. So this is the old view because I don't have any more the application. With the allocation rate, so how much gigabyte of memory we allocate per second, which means how much memory we ask and return to the operating system every time, which costs a lot in practice if it's too high. Here we see that we allocate 6 gigabytes of memory per second, meaning that we pass our time to exchange the memory with the operating system, which is not good. And thanks to Malt, with the metrics, looking at the volume of memory allocation, we can find directly from where it's coming in the code. And here we find a pattern which is making a memory allocation, making a copy, and making a deallocate. If you have the habit of memory management, this is a pattern of making a realloc. So you have an array which is growing over time, but in Fortran you don't have the realloc function, so they made it by hand by making a new allocation, a copy, and a free, which make the exchange with the operating system quite often. So here we see that in volume we requested 60 gigabytes of memory to the operating system, which we will explain why during the school will cost a lot. So they made some changes by reducing the number of time they were growing the capacity of this array because before were making it one by one. So they made it 100 by 100 or something like this. And they were able to reduce the initialization time of the application from 5 minutes to something like 10 seconds, which were very nice. And we obtained this in a few hours, just I think half a day to understand the problem in the application thanks to Malt, where the developer were searching the problem for a long time before we made the try. I can show another example, which is YELS2, again a numerical simulation about combustion. Here, this is an example about the 16-byte allocation I was showing you before. This is a Fortran code, so we don't expect in a Fortran code most of the time to show to see some small allocation like this, at least in large number. And when I was developing the tool, when I was looking at this code, I found that this large number of small allocation were coming from this line, which is very strange, because this line is not making a malloc. It's just accessing a member of a struct, which is an array, and copying an array member to another array member. So just making a copy. And in practice, there is a memory allocation here. Yes. Myself, I searched for a long time because I was thinking when I developed the tool that this was a bug of the tool. But in practice, no. This is a memory allocation which is generated by the compiler itself. So sometimes the compiler can generate some allocation for you. You know it in C++, but it can arise also in some other languages. And here, this is the case, for example, depending on the option you pass to GFortran or Intel Fortran compiler, it can generate or not some memory allocation on this kind of line. GCC is generating one, Intel is not doing it by default, and if you change the option, this is the invert. So you can find with Malt some performance problem in your code quite easily thanks to the metrics it provides. So sometimes you find some funny things. The 1 byte allocation. So you have a pointer of 8 bytes plus an header of 16 bytes to manage the allocation to allocate a 1 byte data storage, which is not very performant. So if you have just a few of them, it's fine. But if you start to see millions of them, probably you need to improve something in your code. So with Malt, you can find them quite easily by using the minimum size metric, which point you all of them in one go. So for the usage, Malt, you first need to compile your program with -G option if you want to get the line numbers to get the source annotation. Otherwise, all the time metrics, you can get them without compiling in debug. But if you want to have everything, you need to compile with debug mode. Then, to run your program just like you do with Valgrind, you do malt./your program, and it will produce a JSON file as a profile file. And then you will look at your profile using the malt-webview command and giving the profile to the command. Here I made a mistake because the -I option is not there anymore. Sorry. As the webview is Malt WebView is a small web server, you will open your browser to look at the view, and you will get the web view directly in your browser. The nice thing of that is that when you're running on a cluster remotely, you can just SSH to your remote cluster, launch your web view remotely to have access to your source code, your libraries, and everything which is in your cluster, and forward the web view directly locally by making a port forwarding options of SSH. If you want to be a bit more safe remotely, don't use a port, but use a socket file. So it's protected with the user permissions. It's safer than using a port which is accessible to any users on the cluster. Even if there is a password to access the Malt interface, it's better to secure it a bit more. So here, instead of the port on Malt WebView, you say -port and a file, and SSH, instead of saying giving a port for the second argument, you give the file you want to access remotely. Malt, since the last version 1.6.0 is also providing you a way to export statically a part of the interface. So you say Malt WebView --static and giving a directory, and it will provide you a directory with an HTML file static, which you can send to someone else in an easy way. It contains mostly everything except the source annotation and the call tree, so you lose those parts of the interface, but all the other metrics are exported in the view. By default, it embeds also the profile in a compressed way, so you can disable it if your profile is very big. Sometimes it arises, mostly if you are looking in Python codes. So you will have only the white files if you disable the embedding the profile. Since a year, Malt now also have a support of Python. Because in most in HPC now we tend to have some people using a Python script to call their solver, which are written in C. So up to now, Malt was handling well the C part, but for Python was showing the internals of the Python interpreter, which is not very nice. So I question myself and I look on the literature, and there is 2 existing tools to present a bit what is existing. Memray is one of the great tools to profile a Python application in terms of memory management. It's quite light. It provides less metrics than Malt, but it's quite useful and easy to use in practice, also to install. And Scalin, which is done by another researcher which is working on memory management in the US, Emery Berger. And those two tools are quite nice to get a first view on what is happening on your application in terms of memory management for Python. But I wanted to extend Malt, so last year I get the chance to be financed at INRIA and University Grenoble-Alpes with the PUI of Grenoble, the Pôle Universitaire d'Innovation, to get the support of Python, to redo the graphical interface, and to make a greater documentation, which you have now about Malt. So thanks to them about that. So for the support of Python, I now have the support of all the versions of Python since 3.11, also of Anaconda, so you can use it without rebuilding Malt for every version. You can build it once on your system and analyze any Python you have on your system if you have multiple versions installed. So you don't have to set up Malt for every version. Just one comment about Anaconda. Depending on your Linux, you probably fall in a problem with a G++ version which is too recent on your system compared to the version embedded in Anaconda. So in this case, either you use an older version on your system, or either you build Malt with the version of G++ which is in an Anaconda. Python poses me some problem with Malt because Python is doing millions of allocation quite oftenly. So there is a very high overhead of Malt when analyzing such programs. So I made some options to balance between speed and precision. So you can play with the -- profile option of the malt-python command to say which profile to use. So either to make a full analysis, to use some sampling, or to use some default a bit shorter analysis about Malt. So you can get the list of profiles which are here. You can get all of them with help to understand how they configure Malt to run in. So I would say in Python, I'm still learning how to use Malt on Python because I get the support since only 6 months. I would say the good way is first to pass a profiling with no stack to be fast, to just get the time analysis without the source code reconstruction. Then to pass with sampling and to get the default run with the full metric for the Python only. And if you want to make analysis from Python to C, you need to add the Python-full profile. This is what I would recommend if you want to instrument a Python application. I will stop here about Malt and I will move to the next tool, which is NUMA-Prof. So I will make some reminder about NUMA, non-uniform memory access or architecture, depending on how we analyze the word. So I remember here that when you have a server, you might have 2 CPUs on your same on your server, and if you have 2 CPU in your server, each CPU in practice has its own local memory. Which is shared between all the CPU, but if you want to access a local memory, it's fine because you access directly to the link to your memory. But if your CPU2 is accessing some data which are stored in the memory of the CPU1, you will pay a price to pass by this highway here, which can be saturated at some point, depending on how your application is using it. So you can pay a high price to access the neighbor memory, depending on your application, how your application is done. When I say high price here, it can be quite quickly a factor 2, depending on the architecture you have on your server. A bit more complex, you can have also 4 CPUs on the same machine. So in this case, you get 4 memory domains. And if you access to the local one, it's fine. If you access to the neighbor one, it's a bit worse because you will get a slowdown due to this link. And if you're lucky, you have a crossbar in the middle of those 4 CPUs, so we go directly to the next memory with a single hop. But if you are not lucky and you don't have this crossbar in the middle, you will pay a 2 hop price to access to the remote memory, which can slow down your application far more than a factor 2. This is the kind of architecture I was studying during my PhD a lot. even worse because in this server I was working on, it was 16 CPU with 2 levels of NUMA node. So the Bull BCS, which is an architecture built by Bull, the French supercomputer builder. And there we had 16 CPU, which means that you can have up to 4 hops to go to the next to the far CPUs in the machine. This is the problems which I was showing about the performance of the numerical simulation at the beginning of the presentation. In the topology today, you can also have some NUMA inside the CPU. When you have a lot of cores inside your CPU, you also have some NUMA domains inside the CPU, which can be a problem also when you have a singular one. And in addition, you also had some NUMA domains with MCD RAM and some Intel CPUs, for example, on the Knight Landing, which is a bit an old architecture now. But when you have some HBM, so a fast memory inside the CPU, it's also presented as a NUMA domain inside the CPU. So you see that we start to have some complex architecture, and now we need to understand how our application is accessing the memory in this one. So the simple case is the case where a process, a Unix process, is bound to one CPU domain with threads. So you have one process plus threads inside to use the cores which are inside the socket. In this case, the operating system is knowing well how to bind the memory because this process is supposed to access the memory, only the local memory. So Linux is knowing that it should place everything here. Same if you bound your process to the next core, but now if you have a process which is going over two NUMA domains, now you need to take care yourself in your program how you are placing the memory with your threads to make them accessing in a good way the data. So this is the kind of binding where you start to have some problems about performance, and you don't have really tools to know that up to today. So just to understand a bit the NUMA problem, let's say you have I remember here that in terms of memory management, we have two memory layers. The virtual memory, which is addresses in which your application is speaking. When you access to a pointer at address 0x you access this address in the virtual memory space. And in practice, you have the physical memory space, which is below, which is the addresses in the memory banks, the real memory addresses, which is managed by the hardware. And the operating system is making a link between these virtual addresses and the physical one by splitting the space into pages. So this is some segment of 4 kilobytes most of the time. And a segment of 4 kilobytes in the virtual space correspond to a segment of 4 kilobytes in the physical space. But when you are in a machine, when you are making a malloc, by default, a large malloc of more than a page is virtual, which means that you don't have a physical page mapped on this segment. And this is only at the first access, the first touch, that the operating system will give you the physical pages. So if your thread 1 is running on the NUMA node 1, when it's making the first access to the pages, it will give you the memory on the NUMA node 1. If the thread 2 is bound to the NUMA node 2 when it's running, the memory will be placed to the NUMA node 2. And if your thread 3 is moving from one NUMA domain to one others, because it's not bound to one, the memory will be placed randomly depending on where the thread is when it's making the first touch. Which is a problem about performance, because now when we will access next the data, we will probably not be at the right place. So let's show an example. For example, this case we can make a memset to initialize an array, and then making some OpenMP loops, for example, to access an array in parallel to make an incrementation, for example, here on this array. And if we are doing that, there is a big problem in terms of performance, because the memset will place everything on the first NUMA node, because thread 1 is currently on the NUMA node 1. And when I'm making the access, if I'm running on two NUMA nodes, because I'm using all the cores of the machine with two CPUs, half of the threads will access to the NUMA node 1, and half of the threads will access to the NUMA node 2. But the data is on the NUMA node 1, so I will pay a price of performance, which means that in practice, I should make the initialization the same way than making the accesses later. So I need to make the initialization with a for loop and making an OpenMP Pragma OMP for loop exactly the same way than I should that I will do later when I will use my array. Let's say so this simple example on a NUMA standard NUMA machine, the performance is this. If I'm making the memset initialization of the previous code, I will get a loop which takes 35 seconds, for example, in an example. And if I'm moving to the OpenMP loop initialization, making the same initialization that the access I will do later, so being great for the NUMA side, I will now divide by more than 2 the execution time. So we see that here the price we can pay on a simple example is quite high. So the question is now, I need to guess what my code is doing in terms of memory accesses, because when I'm making a malloc, I don't say where I will allocate the memory. It's on the first access that I will do it. And at some point, we wanted to have a tool, so I discussed with Othman Bouizi, which was an Intel engineer at that time, and he made a Christmas letter to me to ask, can we have a tool which permit to track all the memory accesses and know in terms of NUMA what is good and what is bad. So I said myself, yeah, maybe I can derive Malt to do that and to track all the memory accesses to know where the first touch has been made, which are the locations containing the issue, and what are the memory accesses which are wrong. So it gives NumaProf, which is a NUMA profiler, as it is named. So it takes again the same approach than Malt, a graphical web interface, the source annotation, and the global metrics summary. This one, the tool is based on PIN, which is an instrumentation, which is a tool to instrument some binaries. So here I instrument all the memory accesses of an application. It's parallel, which is nice because on NUMA node we never run in sequential. And it permits to analyze your application like this. Just notice that I'm not yet updated to the last version of PIN, so you need to use the last version free available, which is 3.31, because I made a new version 4, but by breaking the API of PIN, so I need to update Malt when I will have time. So with Malt, I want to track what are the remote accesses we are making, so the one which are posing some problem about the performance. The local accesses, MCDRAM accesses if we have some HBM memory on our CPU, and where the memory has been pinned, so who has made the first touch, so where the problem is coming from. And we want to know also if the threads are moving or not. Let's say that the overhead of Malt is quite high, of NumaProf is quite high, because it's roughly over 40 times multiplier. So you should analyze some simple application and not some, simple application, some small problems and not large one, if you don't want to pass hours to make your analysis. Just to say that I made NumaProf with pin tool, so which permit me to have a nice overhead restriction. Nice. On 256 cores, I have a slowdown of a factor 60. And if I would have used Valgrind to make the analysis, I would have had this curve, which is not scaling because Valgrind is serializing the threads. This is why I'm using pin tool and not Valgrind to make the memory accesses analysis internally. So let's show some examples. So the graphical interface presents itself like this, a bit like Malt. So we have a first touch summary. So how much of the first touch has been pinned? So I mean where the thread have been said that it's attached to one NUMA domain, or if we have some threads in orange that are moving when they are making the first touch in a random way, which can be a problem in terms of performance. You have the memory accesses summary metric also, how much local access we are making, remote access, unpinned access in terms of page, which means that the page is not pinned in some ways. If the thread is moving, which is accessing the page, or if both are unpinned, which means the page has not been said where it should be, and the thread is not said where it should be. We have also the access matrix, which ideally should be a diagonal. So ideally, NUMA node 1 should access data from NUMA node 1. NUMA node 2 should access to NUMA node 2. and we should not see this kind of line, or at least not too much, which is the case where all the threads of a NUMA domain are accessing to one single NUMA domain, which we can see here also the balance of the number of pages which how they are distributed over the NUMA domain. So here we have a bit more memory allocated on the NUMA domain 0, which can sometimes pose some problems on the accesses, and can explain probably this vertical line in terms of access. We can also have the summary metric per thread, so how much remote accesses each thread are doing, or how much they are making local access. So here we have a thread 1 which is making half of unpinned access, so a bit of time where it's running randomly, let's say, and then it is pinned and making some nice accesses because everything is in green. Once every 4 threads, we see that there is a small effect which we'll discuss during the school why it is happening. We have some remote accesses which arise sometimes, but if it's not too much, it's not a big problem for the performance. It's a problem if it starts to become a high part of the execution. We can have also the details per thread. So if you have all the threads, you can dig on the thread number and get the details of the thread, how the pinning log, how the threads has moved during the execution, the access matrix of this thread, and the summary metrics of the first touch and the accesses for this thread. So you can understand thread per thread how it is behaving. And as a format, the main view of NUMA Prof is source annotation, which is here. So you select the function you want to access, and you can click on a metric for a line and get the charts with the metric in terms of first touch or accesses about this line. So this way you can understand quite quickly what is wrong in terms of NUMA on your application. So just here to show an example, there is the Hydro code, which is a code from which was a prototype code from someone at CEA at some point, and there was a NUMA problem when I was testing it because a third quarter of the accesses were remote, where just a quarter of them were good in terms of locality. If we look on the Hydro code with the access matrix, we see exactly the problem I was explaining before. The accesses were done on a single NUMA domain, so we don't have the diagonal we should have. So there is clearly exactly the same problem I was explaining before with the OpenMP initialization loop. So for this, you can search for the remote accesses to know on which lines they arrived. So here there is some matrix computation in a for loop, which is parallel with some OpenMP loop. So we can guess that the problem is a bit the same than what I was explaining before, that the initialization time was not exactly done the same way than the accesses later. So we can say, we can look on the metric to search where the remote accesses are done. We see that there is a new matrix which is created, and we can look on that code and see that in the initialization part of this matrix, we miss the OpenMP parallel loops to make the initialization in the threads exactly the same way than they are accessed later. So in this example, we don't win a factor 2, but already we see that the access is now diagonal on the node, and we see on a large computer that we gain 20% of performance just by adding 2 lines in the code. Because I just added these 2 parallel loops in the code, and I win 20% of performance on the code, which sometimes can be more. This code was already done in a relatively nice way, but partly wrong on that part. We'll stop here for the presentation to move to a bit of demo. So just remind that memory management is not trivial. You can have some large programs which show some large problems also on this domain. So it needs to be taken into account. This is not optimizing a large program. This is not only optimizing the loops, it's also optimizing the global way to manage the memory if you want to have the performance at the end. And we have seen that some tiny mistakes can cost a lot with large variation of performance, which sometimes are larger than making some vectorization, etc. in the code. With the difficulties that the problem can sometimes be elsewhere than in the loop. For the NUMA problem, for example, we have seen that the problem is not in the loop itself when we are making the accesses, but in the initialization a bit before in the program, which is sometimes hard to understand if you don't have some tools like I provide with Malt and NUMA Prof. So I hope those tools permit you to get a first view and help to understand how the memory is behaving on your app. If you want to find Malt, you can get it on this website. The Malt and UmaProf are both hosted on the same website. I will take a simple example. So as I said, the important thing is to compile with -g. If you want to reconstruct the call stacks in a nice way, it's better to use -0 or -1, not -2 or 3. Even if Malt is also running well with those optimization levels. Sorry, I was forgetting. Thanks for the reminder. So as I said, option -g, -0 ideally, and then I run malt./simple-case, my program, which is very short and which produce a JSON file, and I can launch malt-webview my profile file, and I get the malt WebView, which remind me that I will get the WebView on the localhost, the HTTP localhost port 8080. If I want to forward my SSH with my SSH remotely, I can do that, and I get a token to get access to the interface when I connect on it. So I can take the browser here. So the first time you connect on the interface, you need to enter the token. And you get the summary page with the run informations, which I presented here. I will not stand long for that. The metrics, so the physical memory peak, the virtual memory peak, which is here is 500 megabytes. We see that there is a gap between the virtual and the physical. The physical one is the one which make you killed if you consume too much memory. The virtual one is not costing it's not accounted by the operating system as a problem because this is a physical one which will make your program killed if there is an out of memory. The requested memory peak is what is requested with malloc and the number of blocks alive at the peak time. Here I get a small warning because I get too many global variables, for example, in this program. So you can put your mouse on the warning and get a small sentence which explains why probably you need to look on this metric. The warnings are not perfect, but it tends to show you that probably some metrics are strange compared to the others. You can get some memory leaks. Here I get 16 blocks which are leaking at some point. You can get also the number of memory allocation per domain in the C domain or in the Python domain or the mmap domain if you are using directly mmap in your code instead of malloc. So you can understand how it is distributed in both domains. And you get the top 5 metrics for top 5 function for some metrics. So the number of allocation, what are the functions which are doing the more allocations here. The cumulated in terms of volume, and at peak time, this is where if you want to reduce the memory consumption of your app, you will look on. For example, at the peak time, my program is using 1 megabytes, which is allocated in a test peak. And the leaks, of course, same way, where they are coming from. The good point that is that from this function, I can click and I go directly in the code. Which is the source part here on the source table on the menu, and I can select the metric which by default is a global peak metric. So I can go to the top function, which is here. I'm making a memory allocation of 1 megabyte, and this is what is consuming the memory at peak time in the test peak function. I can change the metric, for example, to get the number of allocation I'm making. I can select the amount of memory allocation I made by summing all the mallocs which are done on this line. And you can see here that there is a lot of metrics about the reallocs, where they are done, the lifetime, where there are some short life allocation, recycling ratio, if there is some lines making some reallocs a lot. For example, here, if I go to this line, this loop is reallocating 100 times this block, which to be interpreted if it's a problem or not, depending on your code. Here I'm making a malloc and just a simple access and a free. Probably I should have put this allocation outside of the loop to get better performance. You get also the call stacks. If I click on one line, I can go on this point and you get the call stack to access this location here. And you can click on the call stack also to go on a specific function to dig in the code. You can get the same view as I showed as this metric, but on the call tree directly. Call tree where you can browse in to go down in the metrics. You can also select some filters, because by default I'm presenting only the nodes which cost more than 1%. You can send none to have everything, which in most programs is far too much because there is too many nodes to look at it. You can of course zoom on it. And you can go directly to the source code by clicking on a node to go to see the function in the source annotations. As I said, there is a timelines, so there I can see the dynamic of the application in terms of memory allocated over time. Here there is a big M map at some point, so it didn't translate in a requested allocation. There's a number of chunks allocated over time. This permits to understand how many blocks you have allocated at a moment in the application. The allocation rate in terms of volume. If you have a large peak here, I have a function which is allocating 32 gigabytes per second, which is quite a lot. So maybe I need to look on this function if it's not a problem. And the allocation rate in terms of operation. So here it's correct because I'm not making millions of allocation per second. This arrives sometimes in some codes. And the system memory is more to see how the memory is full. The system is full. You get the allocation sizes, so in terms of charts, with the distribution over the sizes. As I said before, sometimes, most of the time in application, you see that most of the allocation are small ones. But if it's millions, maybe you need to ask yourself if it's correct. You get some charts to get the distribution over time. So to see over time, what is the sizes which are allocated. So most of the time, you tend to see one line or all the allocation at the beginning of the application and nothing after, depending on how your application is doing. Here we have a line which is allocating everything along the execution. And you have the lifetime also over the sizes. So here the size of the blocks and the lifetime of the blocks, which means that if you have something in the part which is large blocks with short lifetime, it's a problem in terms of performance. The page with the global variables show you the top 10 global variables, if it's a TLS or not, and the size it's allocating. You have all the metrics. You can also go in the source code to directly see where it is, if Malt succeeded to find where the global variable is. And the view of the distribution over the binaries, over the libraries of your application, which one is taking the memory place, and in terms of variables themselves, to know how it is placed. Here you get a kind of different view of the same thing, differencing the TLS and the global variables to understand what you are using in your application. Let's see also here that you have the size of the application of the variable plus the accessed memory, saying that here I'm using only 1% of the memory I allocated on this variable. Which probably means that it's useless to have a global variable so large. This is more experimental because this is not yet perfect. I can also track the size of the stacks for every threads and select for each thread what timeline it has, so I can understand also the memory used on this side, and the distribution over the threads. As I was discussing, here I have one thread which is making most of the allocation and the others making just a few. You have the number of allocation, the time passed per thread in the allocation and the accumulated memory allocated per thread in terms of amount. A bit less useful, but sometimes it is the analysis of realloc. This is the only tool which I know which report this kind of thing. All the jumps which are allocated by realloc here, the number of jumps from 16 bytes to say 32 bytes, and I mean different way to present the gaps and a view of here there is not too much, but from where we are coming to where we are going in a wheel. To see all the jumps which are going in one way to another. And that's it for the demo for now. Maybe we can go to the questions.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Sebastian. We have already some question. So a question from Sergey. Is there a way to monitor a portion of the code, not the whole mammoth?
Yes, I can go to the documentation. If you go on the documentation of Malt, there is a way to do that, which is a subpart of a program. This is more for Malt. NumaProf, I forget, I don't have it really in NumaProf, but in Malt you can disable Malt at the beginning, calling if you include malt.h in your program and link to a library. You can disable Malt, making some mallocs, enabling Malt to track only the last one, for example.
Okay, so you explicitly
say in your code where you want to make your analysis.
You cannot tell Malt, for example, okay, start once I call this function, or
no, not yet. No,
okay.
This is something I can add, but no.
A lot of questions from Tanguy. What do you think about profiling with system.nanotime? I wrote a simply class which measures the computation times plus IO times. I don't know if it's impact a lot the performance, but probably.
System.nanotime, this is I don't know. I never used this one, so sorry.
Yeah, I would guess it's Python.
Probably. Well, this is what I guess from the system way. I don't know. I cannot answer this. There is another part of the question.
This information, about the log. Yeah, this information I wrote in the log. Why do I log it always? Because some clients are complaining about the speed of the execution, and in that way, I will know if the problem comes from their configuration, where are the data can impact IO, or from their machine executing the code. Yes, so you log everything, and maybe at some point you will have some problem with the log itself.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying about Malt. Malt is a profiler, not a tracer. This is the difference between the kind of tool we have in the domain. When you make some profiling of an application, you can do two things. Either you log in a file every allocation and then you make an analysis post-mortem. The problem of that is that for memory allocation, for example, you can get millions and even sometimes billions of allocation, which finish in a file for a log, which is, I don't know, 1 gigabyte to or 10 gigabytes for a large application. So most of the time, when you want to make a fast analysis, you select in another way, making a profile, which means during the execution, you project your metrics over some simplified views, and you store only these simplified views at the end of the execution. This is nicer because you make a lightweight profile. It's a bit faster during the. You are making the analysis online, so it adds a bit of cost, but then you get a smaller file at the end to run in.
And if you have a crash during the run of an application because you want to debug it also a bit, do you handle the crash and be able also to flush what you measure?
Yeah, yes and no. If it's a segmentation fault, no, because I cannot do anything. If you have an out of memory, there is a special way to track the out of memory in Malt. There is an option which is -O, which option dump on system full at, for example. So you can say when your system is full at 80%, dump the Malt profile before the application was killed. So which you can also, in a simpler way, use the profile out of memory, OOM. In this way, Malt will dump before the end of the execution the program. So you can use several ways. You can dump on a signal, which can be a signal you send to the program by yourself. You can dump after a certain amount of time when the system is full out, when the virtual memory reach a certain amount of memory. Same for the virtual one. For the requested memory, I mean all the mallocs if they reach a certain amount. If the stacks are reaching a certain amount of memory, the number of allocation, if you're seeing too much allocation, you can dump also. Watchdog, this is to track this metric a bit more often during the execution, because otherwise I make the analysis of the metrics only when I'm notified only when a malloc is done in the program. There is some ways, but in case of a stake fault, no, I will not dump on the stake fault, on the crash itself.
Okay, or maybe you know your program and you say, okay, I will wait this amount of seconds before the horrible crash happened, and maybe it's okay.
Yeah.
But you can, yeah. Question from Maxime. Do Malt and NumaProf works for the MPI CUDA applications?
Alors, for MPI, yes, both are running for MPI. For Malt, there is some documentation here. You first need to run, this is the same for NumaProf, to run preparation of for an MPI wrapper to glue Malt with the specific MPI you have on the system. And then you just add the option --MPI when you run Malt. So for MPI, you put the MPI run before Malt, not the invert. So MPI run the option of MPI, and then Malt --MPI and your program. And then you get a profile for every processes. So you will get Malt your program -1, Malt your program -2 with the ranks of your application. So Malt is not aggregating all the metrics of one in one profile for the full application. It's not done yet. I want to do it at some point, but I don't yet have the time to make it. Also, you can filter on the ranks. If you want to filter, you can say -O filter column ranks and select the ranks for which you want to dump the profile. To not because most of the time in MPI, most of your processes have the same behavior, so you don't want to dump all of them. This is not useful. The last question was about CUDA. So for a CUDA code, Malt is analyzing only the mallocs, not the memory allocated on the GPU. So I'm doing currently a patch to support CUDA malloc, etc. I have a first prototype running, but it's not yet available in production. I don't know
you mean
when.
CUDA malloc on the GPU, the CUDA malloc host on CPU?
Host.
Okay. So you manage pin memory of CUDA on the host. Okay.
For NumaProf, no, it will not support anyway the GPU. You don't get some Numa inside the GPU, so you don't care too much. But for Malt, yeah, I'm working on the support. Yeah, I don't know yet when it will be available because I need time to make it.
Okay, Philip is asking, thanks for your presentation. Is Malt also able to profile memory allocation and usage for GPU? So apparently no, not yet.
Not yet. I mean, I have a first prototype which is running, but yeah, not yet.
Yeah, not yet in production, but it's coming.
Yeah.
Okay. Question from Dorel. Does the experimental support from Python work?
So the support of Python is quite fresh. So it dates from the first release has been made 10 months ago. It's a bit stable since 6 months, let's say. So it's working. I currently have a lot of overhead. This is the problem. And another problem I have with Malt is that Python is making some mallocs mostly on every line of the program compared to a C++ program. So the profile is a bit heavy in practice, which slows down the graphical interface and makes the analysis a bit more difficult. So for the performance side, I would say Malt is not really useful, even if I already seen some things in Python with that. But for Python, I would say Malt is more useful to track the memory consumption. This is easy to analyze. For the loops themselves, it's a bit harder to find, except if there is a big hotspot, what we can improve in terms of speed. We will probably show an example during the school about the Gray Scott reaction. There is a nice one. But yeah, if you have some problems with Python and Malt, please report to me because I mean it needs to become more mature. And if you see some things, I will be glad to have the feedback.
Okay, another question from Maxime. You want Malt to support CUDA malloc, but what about data movement? So host to device, device to host, host to host, device to device.
Yeah, interesting question. No, I will not track. I mean, this is tracking only the malloc. So Malt is made for the not to track the memory accesses, but the memory consumption and memory management costs. So I will track only the fact that you allocate the memory and that you consume the memory on your GPU. Which means that I think the interesting part for this will be the case where you consume too much memory on your GPU and you want to understand from where it's coming, more than for the performance side.
Yeah, or maybe if you have not too much allocation, but a lot of copy with memcopy, CUDA memcopy, stuff like this, maybe you will have also some problem. But you cannot see them with...
yeah, but I mean,
Malt.
for this, you already... yeah, Malt will not track this. I mean, for
but
now,
you have insight for this, for
you
example.
have insight for this already,
Oh.
so I will say the benefits of Malt will be to understand the memory consumption. If you are full in your GPU, how you can reduce your footprint and where it's coming from. I think this is the goal I currently have for this.
Okay, Doral is thank you very much. So it's okay. So there is no more question from now. So I will switch to mine. Yeah, related to NUMA node also. If I try to do a simulation well and I pin my my process to one NUMA node because I just want to be bothered with that.
Yeah.
Can I be out of memory at some point because I use only a part of all the available memory? How does the system handle that? Can I use the other part even if I have no thread on them, or do I have a segmentation fault even if I use maybe a quarter of the whole memory?
Yeah, good question. In practice, if you're NUMA node 1, I mean, when you are making your first touch to access the memory, so notice that the seg fault will happen not at the, I mean, if there is not any more memory available, the seg fault happen not at the malloc time, but at the first access time because you will ask for a page, for a physical one. The operating system, what it is doing is that if your thread 1 is on NUMA node 1, the priority is to give you a page on the NUMA node 1. But if there is not any more memory on the NUMA node 1, it will give you a page on the NUMA node 2. Up to the point where there is no pages on both, and then you will get a seg fault. I mean, an out of memory killing.
So this means that I can try to pin everything on the right NUMA node, but I need too much memory, and I still pay a penalty.
So then you will pay a price.
Yeah.
So
okay,
this
so
you can detect with NumaProf. In this case, you can detect with NumaProf that you will generate some remote accesses, yes.
Yeah, so you can say, okay, I don't understand, I have a slowdown, but I pin everything on the same NUMA node, but you consume too much memory, and then you have it's not really a leak, but a leak in terms of NUMA node, and then you have a big penalty, and you slow down your application, and you don't know why. Okay.
One thing about NumaProf also, maybe I can tell. NumaProf has a nice thing also. If you don't have a NUMA cluster on your hand, you can also simulate a NUMA domain by using an option directly. You can use an option which is emulate.numa equal, and you say the number of NUMA nodes you simulate on your CPU. The only constraint is that you should have a number of NUMA nodes which is a multiple of your number of cores, and you cannot have more. So let's say if you have an 8-core CPU, I mean for 4 threads CPU, you can simulate up to 4 or 8 NUMA nodes locally on your machine. So if you want to validate that the NUMA correctness of your application, you can do it locally in practice.
Hugo is saying you thanks for your presentation. Maybe another question: if you are using Malt and you do not retrieve the information from the allocation because you don't have maybe the debug symbols, or you don't have maybe the function is not called. Can you make the difference? If the function is not called, you can say, okay, it's strange. The function does exist, but I don't use it, or just you don't see the function because it's not called.
What you mean? Sorry, can you ask again? So you don't have the debug symbols? That's the point?
Yeah, maybe I can have the debug symbol, but I don't call a function which does an allocation, or I don't have the debug symbol and I call this function. Can you make the difference between these two?
You mean
scenarios?
making the diff between two profiles? That's the point? This is something I will be very happy to have, but no, yeah,
Okay.
not yet, no. I mean, you need to put both profiles close together and to compare. I mean, putting.
Yeah, maybe you try to fix something and you say, okay, is it really fixed or not?
No, you need to compare by eyes. I mean, making two browsers on a side. I would like to have it. I would be very happy to have it, but this is also a lot of work to get it.
In fact, it depends, because if you change, you try to have a nice design, and you have one part of your software which is dealing with all the memory or the internal representation of what you want to simulate, and you change it to improve everything. Maybe it will have an impact on all the other part of your software, and you want to
what I could do
that,
probably is to make a diff. I mean, to make a diff of the two profiles. This is something I could do, and display here the difference instead of the absolute value. I never tried, but this is true. This is something which could be very interesting, yeah, and required probably.
And maybe if I forget to put the debug symbols in my compilation, do you have a warning to say, oh, I don't get the information?
No, because I will notice it at the end of the execution.
Okay.
Because I'm solving the symbols at the end. There is something I want to do, is to be able to solve the symbols in post-mortem if you missed them at runtime, but I don't yet made the thing. Now I made such that I have all the information to make it, but I don't yet made the executable, the tool to make it. It's not a big work, but I mean, I don't yet had time. But that's something which could be useful.
I have another question also for Mal, because you talked about the swap, because you can slow down everything, because of course you are using the disk and you don't want to use the disk. But is it really useful now, because it's several gigabytes and you have hundreds of gigabytes on the server? Is it really worth it to have a swap, or is it so small that
No, the recommendation now is swap. You put a small swap just to save a bit the situation at the beginning when you go out of memory. But putting, for example, 10 gigabytes of swap, this is useless because you will pass hours to read the memory. This is a bit better with
2 gigabytes.
Yeah, that's it. That's the point. So you never put a swap of 10 or 20 gigabytes in a machine. So, and even if you make such a large swap space, in practice there is still some discussion in the kernel side if it's behaving in the correct way. Because it's very hard to guarantee that there is no problems which rise up when you are swapping. So if you are swapping very a lot, you possibly can have some problems also in the operating system itself.
Okay. Yeah. So you just have the time to cut everything to be sure that you don't crash your machine.
Having the swap is more to have some time to react when you see that you are going into the swap and kill your application. More than that, it's I mean, probably you can find some use case where you have some big arrays you access only once every hours, and then it's fine if it's in the swap. But for the rest, it's useless.
Oh yeah, another question: how it's possible to have a 1 byte allocation? Because I can understand for a table, but it's a table of byte, and you use them as character or as bits, for example, or as Boolean. Okay, but why 1 and a lot of 1? Is it hidden in the structure? How can you make that?
There is several ways. For example, let's say, I don't know, you have you make an std list, for example, of boolean. Or it will not make one, but bad example.
Yeah, that's my point. If you have
a class, if you have a class something which has nothing inside, also it will, depending on how your compiler will react, it will probably make an allocation of 1 byte.
Okay, this could be a trick of the
So if you have
compiler.
a char,
Okay.
if you have a single char inside, because or single boolean inside, also it will be 1 byte. So no, there is situation where you can make 1 byte allocations.
Yeah, but
mostly with the templates. With the templates, sometimes you can rise up with 1 byte allocation, because you don't see that in the end it will make an allocation of your thing, which can be a boolean only.
Yeah, I can understand that you can have a boolean at some point, but how it's possible to have this become a problem in your memory? Because if you don't have a table, you don't have much. You will not create 1,000 variable of 1 byte, or
depending on how you implement your code. I mean, I already seen some cases, so I forgot what they were doing, but I already seen some cases where it was the case. Yeah.
I don't know how to do that.
It was done through templates, and at the end it was generating some allocation of 1 byte, some temporary.
Through an expression template or thing like that, yeah. And you have a temporary of 1 byte, and then you copy, and then okay.
This can probably rise up also if you use some std function. If you capture, I don't know. No, capture will be more than 1 byte. So I don't have an example on my end like this, but this is rare. I mean, if you have such a problem, normally is that you make a very big strange thing.
Yeah, you have a big red flag. Yeah. Normally it should not happen.
Normally it should not happen. What can happen is to have a temporary allocation of 1 byte and a lot, because you make a short-lived allocation of 1 byte. This is not very correct, but is not. You will not pay a very high price to get it, so we can say it's okay. But if it's staying over time, it can be a problem. Yeah.
Okay, or maybe if you want to serialize, you have a serialization library, and even in this case, or a static serialization library. I don't know. Yeah, it's quite.
Anyway, you all the time find some. I mean, you can look on any program you pass, you find some 1 byte allocation. So there is some, not a lot.
Yeah, you can have some, but having too much that it becomes a problem. Yeah, it's.
But even 8 bytes, if you allocate 8 bytes or 16 bytes, this is already a problem in practice, because if you count 8 bytes, for example, the float, if you make them one by one, for example, because you put them in a std map or something like this.
Yeah, a list, pointer of something, because
you make an std map, for example, an std map of float. You will make a lot of allocation of, so this will be 24 bytes. But already 24, this is not this is big, because you have 8 bytes of pointer plus 16 bytes of headers. So already you double the memory consumption.
Maybe this one is not a map, is a set, because you have only one template and not two. But yeah. Okay. So you have to be careful if you use really simple types.
I mean, use a bit, it's fine. If you use a lot, then there is some problems.
Yeah, you have to maybe redesign. Okay. About NumaProf, you said it's based on Pin from Intel, but does it work on AMD or ARM?
AMD, yes. ARM, no.
Okay.
I would be very happy if someone can make me the support with Dynamorio, which work on both, but and is open source, which will become better for me. But yeah, AMD, yes, because Pintool is running in everything which is x86, but not on ARM.
Because Dynamorio is not up to date. Dynamorio, you cannot use it, or?
No, the thing is that when I made NumaProf, I made it with PinTool because PinTool has more, more tools in the library to help you to make the work.
Ah, okay.
Which in Dinamorio you need to redo a lot of things yourself to analyze all. I'm analyzing all the assembly instructions, so it's not not so easy to do. In PinTool, they already provided all the wrappers to make the thing to track all the memory accesses, which is not done yet in Dinamorio. You need to redo by hand a lot of things. So. I mean, in principle, this is not impossible to do. This is just that it requires probably 1 or 2 months of work, which I never had the time to do myself.
Okay. Maybe on NumaProf, yeah. Once you said that you can have the address when you have a remote access and you can say, okay, this line does a remote access. Do you have the address of the remote access inside the table that you access, so you can have an idea of what is the section of the table used by another
No,
node?
but you have the line at which you make the remote access. So this is what is important in the end.
Okay, so after that you have to say, okay, maybe it's
make,
one part of this table.
I can make the example with this. Time for a small demo. OpenMP case, OpenMP, OpenMP loop. So here I have 2 loops, one with the first touch wrongly done. I forgot to.
I'm pretty sure you have a bad first touch.
In practice, you will find who has made the wrong first touch. So here I have an example where I have some wrong accesses and some nice one. So in practice, if you go in the source code, you will search for the remote accesses. Where it is? Remote accesses. So here on this line, I'm making some wrong accesses. So buffer is sometimes remote, sometimes local. And if I want to find from where it's coming, I will search for who has made the wrong first touch. Donc the first touch is made. So I will find all the first touch, but not only the one I triggered. But for the first touch here, it's all pinned. And I don't have the NUMA node, sorry, what I wanted to explain. So you will search, I mean, if you have a lot of remote accesses, sorry, if you have a lot of remote accesses, now you need to find from where they are coming, okay? So who made the first touch of the arrays? So you need to go to the first touch metric. And here I see that I'm making all my first touch pinned. So it is true that I don't have the metric on which NUMA node it is placed. Because in practice it is placed all on the NUMA node 1, this one. But the problem comes from here. Because this is the part who made the first touch. And we see we don't have the Pragma OpenMP loop on top of it, compared to here. There is no way currently to link exactly the first touch which is done by a single line, no. So this you need to analyze by yourself to search the first touch on the program, which is already a great thing, because otherwise, if you don't have such a tool, you have nothing to guess from where the problem is coming from.
Yeah, you know which table is involved in this remote access. Yeah.
But as you said, you don't know the index in the table. Yeah. This I don't have. But it's even worse than Malt. Malt, I get notified 10 million times if there is 10 million allocation. For NumaProf, I hooked on every memory access, which which means that NumaProf is called 100 billion times during the run. So I cannot fetch too many informations if I don't want an overhead of 1000.
Okay, and since you already dig into some of big program in your work, is it really common to have this kind of I forget to do my initialization parallelly. Do you have some tricks to think, okay, if you put one pragma somewhere, you need to put another for the initialization? Always think about that. Do you have some advice?
NUMA, the problem of the NUMA is that most of the time you didn't wrote your code to think about NUMA at the beginning. And you say after that now I need to support NUMA. And you need to guess where you forget something. So let's say this problem is quite common. This exact simple problem is quite common in practice. I see it on most of the codes I'm passing on. Here in the labs I arrived, one of the code is concerned, at least. The other I don't yet checked. But most of the time when I passed NumaProf on a code, I all the time found exactly this kind of example. All the time. Because even if you take care, you probably forget one at some point or make it in the wrong way, which if you have some complex accesses in your program is also true. So I would say my better recommendation is about NUMA. If you are MPI plus OpenMP, run your MPI process, one MPI process on one CPU so you don't have any NUMA effects, and use threads inside the CPU, inside the socket. So they are safe on the same NUMA node. In practice, my recommendation is to avoid the problem in practice, and there you are sure of what happens.
As you said, most of the time you start to develop with your laptop. You don't have NUMA node on your laptop, and you forget about it. And once you run on a big server, you have a problem, and you say, "Oh, it's slower than on my laptop. I don't understand."
For example, there is one of the code I'm working on currently. When you make the OpenMP proc bind to run it fully on a node, you get a penalty of a factor 2. And if you don't bind, this is going faster. So, which means that there is a big problem about the NUMA in the code.
Okay.
I don't yet analyze exactly why, but for sure this is exactly the problem I showed.
Okay, I will ask a last question because otherwise it will be a bit late. On Malt, do you handle tricks like TBB malloc proxy once you change the malloc on the fly?
So I don't manage it by default, but if you want to use some custom allocator and you know the API, you can
because TBB malloc proxy replaces the classic malloc. So if you can handle the classic malloc, maybe you don't see it, and you.
If it replaces the default malloc, it's working out of the box, so there is no problem. The problem is if you use a custom allocator, for example, you use some g_malloc in your code. Then you need to wrap those functions, and in this case you can use malt -- wrap prefix with g_. I mean, putting the prefix which is behind all the functions, or you can list all of them if you don't have a common prefix to also intercept those internal mallocs. As long as they are built in a dynamic library, this is a requirement as a shared library. As long as you replace the default malloc with your own one, it will run, and also it will tell you which malloc has been used. If you look here, it will tell you which malloc library is used for the default malloc. So you will see here your TBB.
TBB malloc proxy. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you want to play with another malloc that you want to test or a new one, you can just use the prefix if they use the classic API. Otherwise, you will maybe have some problem, or you have to wrap it to the classic API to be sure that you will handle it well.
That's it.
Okay. Thank you, Sébastien, for the presentation, for all the answers, for the demonstration also. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We'll stop here, I think, because it's quite late. So thank you, everyone, for joining today. Next week, we'll do some black magic with C++ algorithms. So the std transform, the std for each, all this kind of stuff, and the view transform and the zip and this kind of stuff. I have a lot of good news for you for next week. I will do the presentation. And thank you, Sébastien, again for coming today. Thank you, Mary, also for the presentation. And see you next week. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you,
everyone.
Sébastien.